This week on the Documentary Review Podcast, Jonathan and I decide to start bottling podcasts and selling them by the gallon at the side of the road as we discuss the 2013 documentary Burt's Buzz. Welcome to the podcast. I am PT.
I'm Jonathan. Glad you can join us.
Indeed, glad. So before we get started, Jonathan, before we get into it, there's obviously elephant in the room here. Anything you? Well, I'll let you go first. I'm sure there's something that you want to say to me on this very, very special day, but I'll let you take it.
Wow, we've been podcasting for a time that is specific and worthy. No. Let's see.
Well, obviously you're kidding around because you know, but I'll just go ahead. It's International Podcast Day. As we recorded this, so obviously you were just kidding.
Obviously,
but
I'm very excited about International Podcast Day.
Happy podcast to you, Jonathan. Happy podcast day.
Yes.
This is a special day because, as you well know, it's a day that it's like Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries, all rolled into one. So, as is tradition at Podcast Day, we got each other presents. So, I don't know if you want to share your present for. I'll share mine first. I've got you a nice little gift here. Got a gift bag. I'll go ahead and open it and see what I got for you. Oh, it's nice podcasting headphones for podcasting day.
Sweet.
Go ahead and put those aside.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. So what do you got for me?
Thanks. Yeah, I got you a brand new speaker to go with your iPhone thing here. I already
nice.
Yeah, I unwrapped it for you, but it's nice because it's got a little bass feature and it changes colors for you. So I got that. I'll just put aside here, and then we can get that put in the mail after this, I guess.
Good deal. All right. Well, that's oh man, that's touching. That's a lot of thought into that.
I was thinking about you when I got that.
Well, I hope all you guys, listeners out there, having a just amazing International Podcast Day as we are here. Man, it's a moving day in my heart. All right. With that out of the way, that bit being done, let's go ahead and get into the podcast or get into the documentary. Tell us a little bit about this one, Jonathan.
All right. Burt's Buzz is a documentary that focuses on the symbol of the company Burt's Bees, which I don't know if you're familiar with their lip balms and honeys and all that stuff, but that image is an actual person named Burt, who is the founder and very eccentric gentleman. I don't know, maybe eccentric is taken a little too far. Certainly leads to his own drummer. Lives kind of off grid, more or less, but it's kind of the backstory. Really a feature of him, who he is, his backstory, and kind of what happened to what the chain of events were to build the company Burt's Bees, and then kind of where Burt's landed here and kind of near the end of the line. He's in his late 70s, so anyhow, but a very kind of straightforward and interesting documentary.
All right, cool. Did you like it?
I did like it. I mean, basically, if you found Burt interesting, you liked the documentary, I would think, and if you didn't, then screw that documentary. You?
Yeah, I like your initial I liked it. I think I'm going about that same level of this is pretty good. It was all right. It was an interesting portrait of this guy, I guess. So boy, I know our hearts are aflutter still from the podcast day discussions, but man, where should we start with this documentary?
Well, I guess what the heck? Let's start in the beginning. Kind of kicks off. They do the old switcheroo. They start off, and Burt's kind of entering a Tokyo airport, landed in Tokyo, and there's
Taiwan,
people waiting there, and
right?
Or Taiwan, Taiwan, and people are cheering and they're all excited about it, and the whole time I'm thinking really, there's a place where Burt has real fame, but apparently, and then it goes 6 months earlier and kind of drops back into the backstory of Burt, and yeah, he's a pretty unusual guy, because he was kind of born with this silver spoon. You find out as the documentary goes on, and he gave it all up. Basically, just but after a while, because first he was born with a silver spoon, He gives that up. Then he becomes a fairly successful journalist or photojournalist. Then he
Right.
gives that up. Then he like lives out in the woods. He basically is like a hippie slash bum,
Right.
and and he's happy.
Yeah.
You know, could
Indeed.
very well have been the end of the story, but
Could have been a 5 minute. Yeah.
well, the,
So on that, one thing that was a little bit of a disappointment to me about that beginning part was like, I don't know if you got this at all, but I felt like from that beginning, the way they were like, oh my God, he's super famous. And then like 6 months earlier, like I felt like at that point, I felt like, all right, this is going to be the story of what happened over that 6 months to like drive his
me too.
crazy fame or something. And really, there was no reason for it to be like,
Right?
it
Yeah.
was like an
Why?
arbitrary time period or whatever.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. There was nothing that specifically happened over that 6 months. There was no like. I thought like something happened. Yeah, to build that, but that was just like an annual trip he takes or biannual
Right.
or something. So it wasn't like. Yes, they tricked you with that. But I guess they had to do something because, otherwise they'd just been like starting with this dude sitting in the woods talking really slowly.
Yeah, Bert seems to have a lot of like overall seemed like a very healthy guy, but he's just always picking at his teeth. He's always got a little something going, something going on with his teeth. Seems like he's always got something stuck in there.
Yeah,
So
or his beard. He did a lot of checking his beard and his teeth, especially
yeah,
prior to each interview. It's kind of funny. And here's something. Did you catch this? So there's one. So he owns this land. He owns like 40 acres up in whatever Maine, and then there's one line where they're like, yeah, the dog drug Bert up from his like little tiny shack up to like bigger house, if you will, on the land. And they like, I assume that was because Bert like had an injury or fell down or something, is what it sounded like to me. Because then they were like, yeah, he's almost good enough to go back down to his little shack. But they never really addressed it. They never talked about like what happened to him, what the story was. Did the dog save its life? Maybe the dog just attacked him and dragged him up to the house. I don't
yeah,
know.
no, that's a great point, and I was confused about that too because I like at first I took it like that the dog attacked him or something, and then I thought about it more. I was like, wait, maybe yeah, but I think that was actually symbolic of like a larger problem throughout, throughout this documentary, which is that like there's a ton of stuff like that where it just like he said something really weird and then they never go into what it was. I wish I would have written some of them down, but there's a lot of things where he just would like reference something like just a little bit and they would never explain that or whatever.
Yeah.
I
I,
don't know.
I think by far the biggest one that they really skimmed over is so I mean like the whole point is the whole thing that makes him who he is he was the co-founder of Burt's Bees, and then the company kind of takes off and they start touching on that a little bit, and then they're like, yep, and then there was a huge falling out, and then he kind of get kicked out from the company. But they gloss over it like that. It's like that could have been the whole documentary, like 30 minutes of it. You know what I mean? Like really gotten into like what happened. They certainly like I didn't write her name down, but the other co-founder, the girl that he was
Yeah,
dating for a
like
while,
Roxanne or something like that.
something like that. Something would start with an R. But anyway, she was never interviewed. Like they pull interviews from like other television interviews she'd done over the years, but certainly like was not friendly enough to even be interviewed on the documentary. Which is kind of that means it's a really bad falling out because even if you had like a bad falling out, you'd still be like, yeah, I'll talk on the documentary. I'll tell my side of it.
All right, sure.
But if she's like, nope, not even going to grant an interview for you guys. Or maybe they
Yeah,
were just really lazy. They were like, well, we could track her down, but that sounds like.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Bert was like that. I hope I never see her again. Whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Not
So, I mean, pretty bitter.
Yeah, not in the best terms. Uh,
Right. But
th- and that is an interesting aspect of it too, is that he's so bitter about that. I know we're totally jumping to the end basically, but um, it's like you have this guy who isn't really interested in material things, material possessions, but yet he is a little bit bitter that he kind of got screwed out of his company, which I mean is understandable.
yeah, yeah. But again, that's why I wish they would have dove into it because he's not bitter about the money. Like, I
Right.
mean, like he lost a ton of money by being screwed out of his company. He's not bitter about that. I don't even know that he's bitter about like losing the company. It sounded like that was something that he was kind of good to be, glad to be done with. He never really wanted a large corporation, and he doesn't have one now, so I think he's okay with that. But she pissed him off. I mean, like on a personal note, she scorned him.
Right.
He was hurt about it. He was mad, and they never. I mean, like again, he just super lightly glossed over it. He's like, well, there was this one like college age girl that was working at one of the stores that I was managing, and then I slept with her, and then Roxanne or whatever her name was all mad about that.
Yeah, and they never really even discussed if like he was ever in a real relationship with Roxanne or not.
Right.
The son that they interviewed kind of was like, well, we probably started the relationship. I don't know, but but yeah, like all Bert says is that like he kind of thought she was the one or whatever, thought she'd be a good, so it was like an ideal woman, but then it never happened. So I don't know if that meant they never got together or he just meant that they never
Yeah,
that
they
it didn't
did,
work out
and they
or what.
never. You're absolutely right. They never filled in the blanks on that because it could have gone either way. 'Cause sometimes when they're talking about it, I thought the same thing. Like, so they were romantically involved, but then they it went south. But then sometimes they'd talk a little bit more, and you'd be like, wait. So they never actually got together. It just seemed like it would have been good. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe yeah.
Hmm.
So, which could have been a great piece or part of the documentary.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the whole thing of like being so ambiguous about things was just to represent Burt, because like there, it's a kind of a little bit of a plot point that like they interview a bunch of different people and they're all like, yeah, I don't really know the real Burt. He just closes himself off, and doesn't open up to anybody. So maybe they wanted us to feel what
Maybe,
the people who know Burt feel. I don't know.
or maybe there was tons of scenes where like the guy cut out because they were like, so what really happened? Like, what's going on with that? And and the son was like, well, I just told you everything. I really don't know. And then like they asked everybody, and they were all like, well, I'm not like his assistant dude. Yeah, I'm not really sure what happened with that. And
Right.
then they asked Burt, and Burt was like, well, I already told you.
Indeed. One of my favorite like things that we never get explanation on is at the beginning, the very beginning, he's going to like the Target Corporation. He's gonna like basically just like hands out some lip balm and then like says hi at the corporate event or whatever. But beforehand, the woman's prepping him, and she's like, "Yeah, like say that you were there in the first Earth Day, but don't say like what happened. Don't describe what really happened. Just say that you were there." And he was like, "Oh, so you don't want me to tell how it really is?" And she's like, "No." And he's like, "Yeah, that was like one of just the best." Whatever. And then he just like trails off. So, like, was it just like a big orgy, or what happened in the first Earth Day?
No,
What's going on?
no, I got the impression. Maybe I'd have to watch it again. I got the impression that they were. She was like, "Don't tell how you really felt about Central Park or whatever it was."
Hmm.
I thought that's what it was, that he wanted to go off on like what a crap hole that was, or how he hated New York and Central Park or whatever. That was the impression I got. But
Yeah, that could be. There was that one part at the end where he's like, "Yeah, that was," and then it just kind of like trailed
yeah.
off. Something about the best. What was the best? What? What was he talking about? But
Yeah,
that's Bert there.
yeah, that's Burt, I guess.
Yeah. So
I The other thing nobody ever mentioned or like fully explained, like at first I thought like, so Burt has one or two full-time assistants, like
hmm,
to help him like live life, like almost
right.
like caretakers. And so at first I was like, well, he owns Burt's Buzz or Burt's Bees,
Hmm.
he's like a multimillionaire, so that's just how he spends his money because he probably needs that. But then later on they're like, well, yeah, he pretty much got screwed out of all the money, so he doesn't really have any money.
Right.
And I was like, who's this is I assume this is not volunteer work because the guy didn't seem to enjoy his job that much of taking care of birds.
No, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about that too, and I was wondering if it was just like the Clorox Corporation or whatever pays those people and be like we'd really like this guy to stay alive because he's kind of like the face of this brand. Can you just keep him alive for a while?
Yeah, it could very well be that like you know that yeah that is because I mean like that's really a small marketing budget. I'm sure that guy is only making 40-50 grand a year or something like
Right.
that to help Bert get groceries or do whatever he's got to do. But their conversations were so awkward. I wish they had more of them.
You know, that guy like did seem like he was trying though. Like he was like he'd try to get Bird in conversations and try to.
Totally, yeah. But that's what made it so awkward because he'd be like, "Yeah, Bert, blah blah, great day or whatever," and then Bert would be like, "Yeah, yeah, so I don't like this wood stove," and he'd be like, "What? This is so such a weird,
Right.
awkward conversation."
So that kind of leads to like a big question I think of the documentary to me, which was like Bird always talks about how this is the life he wants and it's what makes him happy. But I don't know, did he strike you as a guy who was super happy? Do you think? Like,
Well, I got the impression he was like happy when he was alone. You know what I mean? He was certainly like not. So like every time you like threw a camera in his face, he was doing something he didn't like, and every time you're asking about himself, he didn't like talking about himself, and so. But yeah, I don't
right,
know. I mean, it was hard to say. So that was my impression that he really did like his simple life, and apparently he needed to do this to pay the bills at the end of the day.
right,
You
right.
know, that's what it kind of seemed like towards the end. Um, yeah. But
Yeah. So he yeah. So now he's like just like the spokesperson, and he goes and makes paid appearances apparently, and it would have been like, I mean, we would say that for every documentary basically, but it'd be interesting to know a little more about the finances, like how much does he get paid for this and what's going on.
right, is the net worth of Birth $50,000 or $500,000 or
Right.
I mean he said he owns his little plot of land. And then the other guy mentioned that it was a relatively small plot of land for that area. Like a bit more or less 40 acres, but he's like, yeah, it's kind of a small plot of land, so he must be really rural.
Right.
Um, and maybe his taxes are 3 grand a year, and he doesn't have electricity, and he doesn't have running water, I don't think.
Yeah,
So,
he has cold running water, but not
oh
hot
yeah,
running.
that's right. So there's a water line, but he didn't
Right.
get the hot water heater.
Yeah, he likes to do that manually. Um, yeah, it would have been interesting to know too, like how much Roxanne or whatever her name was sold the company for, because they said Clorox bought it for like 200 million or something, but it seemed like there was another company in between those two. You know what I
No,
mean?
no, no. They said at the end she sold 80% of her shares of 80% of the company to Clorox or whoever it was for just shy of $200 million. So she walked away with almost 200 million, or well, she walked away with 200 million plus she's selling 20% of the company.
Nice,
So yeah, so she killed it. I have a
nice.
feeling Bert got nothing or very little.
Yeah, you feel like, I don't know. I feel like if I was that woman, I'd be like, here, you take 20 million, Bert.
Right, but when she got rid of him, I think because she basically like said we're going to sue you for sexual harassment or you're going to sign this piece of paper to like give up your ownership and get bought out. But that was before the company, that was when they were doing like $3 million a year in total business.
All right.
So I mean, who knows? Maybe, and Bert didn't seem to care about money, so maybe she was just like, and he didn't like the job, so maybe she just knew like for 50 grand I can buy him out, and that's that.
Right. Right.
Which, yeah, I'd love to know that number because it could have been 5 million, could have been 50 grand. You don't know.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like when I get $200 million, I'll be like, yeah, what's the difference between 200 million and 180 million? I can kick Bert a little bit,
Right, I
make him
agreed,
feel better.
but I think they might hate each other. So she did really. She would never have made it without him, though. She's got to
Yeah,
feel, even if she hates him, she's got to feel a little bit of like loyalty or gratitude or something for.
I guess. I mean, he was just a guy making honey, right? And then she came in like
Yeah,
had all the ideas behind that brand, pretty much, right?
yeah, for sure. But he worked side by side with her all the way from, he said he was working 12-hour days even when they went to South Carolina or whatever. So he was, in the beginning, it was the two of them running around to craft stores, and I bet you Bert did a good job. Like, he already was getting his honey in like the general stores and already had a little
Right.
bit of a brand prior to her. Not saying that obviously the majority of it was her because he never would have tried to expand or like grow the company. So I mean, it was certainly her that caused all that. But still, she has to owe a lot to Bert. Without
Right.
him making good honey and tagging along for the ride and doing half the work when they had no money, never would have happened.
True.
So
True. True. I do like the one thing I really liked about the whole documentary and is just like how like anti it's basically the exact opposite of every other um, like business story that you hear, like every successful business person memoir or whatever that you read, or like you see like Mark Cuban on TV, talking about how he's like, I went door to door for 3 years, selling this crappy stuff, just doing anything I could to possibly get ahead, and I just worked as hard as I possibly could, and I would let nothing stop me until I was a billionaire. And like Bert was basically like, well, I don't know. I would just stuff just fell into place, and everything just kind of worked out the way it was going to work out. And it's very
Yeah.
like the opposite of the American dream, where like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Bert's philosophy was like,
Yeah.
just do what I can do and yeah, see what happens.
Yeah, that was cool because like that I really like Bert for that, like from that side point of view or whatever, because he's never like he never wanted a ton of money. You know, he was always like because like yeah, like I mentioned before. So first he was like his grandfather started a graphic design business that his father inherited, and then he was to inherit after that, and he just was like, nah, I don't like doing that, so he didn't do it. And then later on, he became a journalist and a successful one. And finally, at one point, he's like, yeah, I don't really like doing the 9 to 5 thing, being stuck in the city, so he just moved out to Nowheresville. And that was it. And then when he was like, his most profound statement was like, somehow he randomly got somebody gave him like his first beehive, which I don't understand how you just randomly get a beehive, but
Right.
whatever. And then he randomly found a bunch of bees, and he was like, "Oh, they already taught me the trade, and I already had the equipment, so I just started like, raising these bees." And I realized once he realized that he could sell honey, he'd never have to work again. And he was like, and that was it. That was the end of Bert, really. Like when it came to business, he was just like,
Right.
"Oh,
Yeah, the part
I,
was cool when he was like, yeah, I knew if I had a couple of hives, it'd never work again. I was like, ooh, I gotta go get me some hives. That
right,
sounds
let's
pretty
get
good.
some bees, man."
Yeah, that sounds pretty all right.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, that's brilliant." I mean, like, yeah, and who cares? Like, I just came back from a week of being like unplugged, where we stayed in a tent and we were up in like Nowheresville, Colorado, up in the mountains in the wilderness. And yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. Like for one entire week or whatever and change, I felt no stress whatsoever. I was like, wow, you know,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
it's pretty crazy. So I can see where he's coming from with his beehives and just like the super low key lifestyle.
Yeah,
A lot to be said about it.
yeah, and it is a good reminder that like our stress and the busy lives we lead are basically our own choice. even
Totally.
though, even though I mean, it's like obviously hard to do what Bert does, and everybody in society will think you're a weirdo, but yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the biggest thing. A lot of people would be like, "What a weirdo."
Right.
But screw them,
Yeah. Screw those people.
Yeah, they'd still probably come over for a beer,
Yeah.
and they'd just be like, "Wow, that's my weird friend that lives in a tent."
Right. My favorite sequence of the movie was like the montage of when he's like answering interview questions in Taiwan, and he's just like basically the worst interviewee ever. Like he just gives the like I used to host this podcast Six String Bliss, and we did a lot of interviews, and like the number one thing I could that when we interview people is like you could tell like the people who are experienced at interviews were really really good at like taking basically any question and acting really engaged with it, but then like talking a little bit about that, but then twisting it towards their message of like what they're trying to, the reason they're there, like promoting what they would have promoted or whatever. And it's like a really cool art form, and I was always happy when I had one of those people who could just take the simplest question and just expound on it for a long time. Yeah, Bert was like exact opposite of that. Whatever question you ask him, basically like I don't know. or like when they asked him, like, tell us about your day. He's like, it depends on like the season and the weather. That was it. It
Yeah,
didn't go into like it could have been like, well, in the summer I do this, winter I do this, but no.
right. Or you could have just been like, "Well, one interesting thing about my day is that I don't have hot water. So if I want to take a shower, then I gotta, go grab some water and then heat it up on this wood burning stove I've got, and then that's how I take a shower." There you go, little anecdote about how interesting his life is. But no, yeah, you're right. Like even when they gave him like the lob, like they teed it up on a little pitch, like, "Here you go, Bert. Just run with this. Follow it up with a sentence about like the obvious answer we want." He was still like, "Well, yeah, it's yeah." It's like, wow, Bert, that's
That's great. Glad you get paid for this. Uh, yeah, they never really explained like why he's so popular in Taiwan. Like, is Burt's Bees just like a huge brand? Like, is it like Coca-Cola there or what? Like, why is he so popular in Taiwan?
yeah. I don't know. Mascots are a big thing over there, so maybe he's like a living mascot. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, elderly people are more
That's true.
revered
It is,
there. Maybe it's a combination of those things.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I also thought it was a very cute scene when he was saying goodbye to that one Taiwan, the leader of the whatever
Right.
business that was kind of like his liaison to whatever, and like she was like in charge of marketing and brought him over and all that. She was like crying. She was so sad to see Bert leave.
Yeah, I kind of thought he was gonna start making out with her or something. He was like getting in there.
I thought
It's
he'd like
weird.
try and make a move or something, but no, he definitely wasn't like. And then yeah, there was like one other thing about like Bert, like three-quarters of the way in, like when he was talking about stuff like how, it never happened with Roxanne or whatever her name was, and like I was like, man, I wonder. And and then his assistant dude was like, so you've never really had like another, you know, any other love interest or anything like that. And he's like, nah, no, not at all. I was like, wow, I wonder if Bert's like a virgin. I mean, he's definitely a social outcast, and like,
Right.
it's pretty hard to date, I'd imagine, when you're living in a shack in the woods or whatever. And
Except for that orgy at Central Park.
right, except for the orgy in Central Park. And then he mentioned like sleeping with some young college girl.
Yeah.
I was like, and then he did have a line in there too. He's like, well, she wasn't the only, like, he was talking about Roxanne. He's like, yeah, she was so mad when she found out, she wasn't the only woman I was sleeping with. I was like, oh, so Bert's a player, I guess. I guess I would have thought there'd be maybe one woman on planet Earth that could make it past that beard, but apparently several.
No, I guess when you run with the hippie culture, you can.
You can pull that off.
I guess so. Yeah, very strange. I thought it was interesting too how like he was obviously like so close to this dog, and like he talked about this dog like that died years ago that he's like still super upset about or whatever. I thought that was an interesting like illustration of how like even this guy who basically cuts himself off from all of humanity, like, but you gotta give your love to something, like for him it's the dogs, I
It's the
guess.
dogs, yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. That again was another really awkward conversation where like his his assistant was like, "So, remember that day your dog died?" And you're like,
It's
Bert was like, "Yeah."
like you're holding
So
his
that
head
was
right to your left.
that, right. Yeah, yeah. You died with it died with its head in your lap, right? Oh yeah, yeah, right in my lap. I saw him take his last breath. That was a dark day, right? A black day. Who was that conversation?
Yeah.
It was so
Yeah,
weird.
right before that, the producers had to go to that guy and be like, "Dude, we gotta get something.
Right.
We've been out here
What
for
is
a week and we
does
got
Bert
nothing."
have an emotion? Can you evoke one? Is this uh
Yeah, good old
but
Bert.
yeah.
Uh, interesting guy though.
Yeah.
Um, I respect him. I guess I respect Bert.
Yeah, no, I like his thing, like I respect the fact that he really doesn't give a crap about really what anyone else thinks or whatever. Just
Hmm.
he's always been true to himself. I thought that was really cool.
Yep.
Except maybe when he built his company, that was probably the only point in his life where he wasn't really true to himself. He just kind of like was along for the ride, ended up with a big company. It was like, oh, it's terrible.
Right. And I did like I kind of like that very ending scene when he was just like building a fire and they just like let it linger for 2-3 minutes or however long. He was just like lighting a
Yeah,
fire.
yeah, I thought that was great too because I was like, oh, well, this is kind of like a good shot of like how Bert should have answered his question like in Taiwan.
Right. And it's also like, good picture of what his life is like when the cameras aren't around. Just standing by the fire trying to be warm.
Yep, do it. Yeah, yeah, I would love to see more interviews with Bert too because like there are a lot of B-roll stuff, a lot of like like that one was a good one where like you said where it's just kind of
Mhm.
like summed it all up. Bert just you know 4 or 5 minutes of silence with Bert trying to like start his fire. But there were a lot of like scenes where I was like, oh, they're just kind of like wasting time or showing B-roll stuff, and I was like, it's interesting to hear Bert talk. I mean, he wasn't like so crazy. It was weird, but he was definitely like fringe enough society that it was interesting.
Right. Good
Yeah,
assessment. Cool. Well,
yeah,
that's about all I got to say about it. You got anything else you wanted to
yeah. I'm
talk
checking
about?
to see if I had anything else in there. Yeah, no, he was like I said, this wasn't the deepest documentary we've ever watched, but it was still interesting. He's a cool dude. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
agree. All right. Well, how many stars are you going to give this bad boy?
I will give it three
Yeah,
stars.
I was going
Good in the
to.
positive camp.
Yeah, I was going to give it 3.5.
Yeah,
In the same range.
yeah.
Cool. So that is Bert's Buzz. Let us know what you thought. You can email us at feedback@documentaryreviewpodcast.com. You can just email us to wish us a happy podcast, International Podcast Day, if you want.
Sure.
That'd be fine.
You can just email us to say we're two good-looking guys. We won't.
Yeah.
That's fine. You can do that.
Totally cool. All right. So for next week, Jonathan, am I picking the movies or are you?
Yeah, you're up because I picked Burt's Buzz.
Okay. I got 3 documentaries that are cold. 3 cold documentaries. All right. The first one is by it's a Errol Morris documentary, which I don't think we've done any of his yet. He's a pretty famous documentary maker. But anyway, this is called Tabloid. It's the story of a former beauty queen who's has a genius level IQ, who I believe like she's dating a Mormon guy and then has him like kidnapped and held captive. That's cold.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's Tabloid. Number 2, we have Exporting Raymond. In this documentary, Everybody Loves Raymond creator Philip Rosenthal chronicles his attempts to adapt his hit sitcom for Russian television. That's cold. It's cold country.
Okay,
Russia.
that is.
And finally, we have The Summit, which filmmaker explores what went wrong when 11 people died on their way up the infamous K2, the deadliest day in modern mountaineering history. Cold trip up a mountain. So we got Tabloid, Exporting Raymond, or The Summit. They're cold. But which do you deem the coldest?
I'm gonna go with Tabloid.
All right.
And find out how somebody makes the leap to kidnap somebody else. That just has always kind of intrigued me as far as I don't know. It seems like even if you're a bad person, there's a lot of different easier ways to make $1 than
Right.
try and go through the whole kidnapping scenario. So yeah, find out how a beauty queen with a genius level IQ tries to pull it off.
All right. Good deal. We'll be watching Tabloid next week on the Documentary Review Podcast. Finally, for the International Podcasting Day, I got to shout out another podcast. And this time I want to shout out Hardcore History, which is the show where they take a super in-depth look at historical events in a really interesting way. I'm listening to a really cool series right now from it on World War I, which I feel like the school system failed me a little bit, Jonathan, on World War One. Like I only know the very basics, so I'm learning some crazy stuff, and it's good times. So check out Hardcore History.
All right. Yeah, I think you got failed by the schools. Although we went to the same grade schools, which were most of your history and whatnot.
Yeah.
Although we broke off kind of early in 4th grade, but there have been a couple times where you've I can tell you had some gaps in your history for.
I don't know.
Every once in a while in life, you've mentioned something like, man, did you know? And I'm like, yeah, I knew that since 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Fill my gaps with hardcore history.
Right.
This hardcore history is pretty hardcore too. It's like 28 hours or something on World War One. So it goes in depth.
Yeah, sounds pretty in depth. We'll rock on. We'll have to everyone out there check out Hardcore History.
All right.
Fill your gaps.
Do it. All right. We will talk to you next time. This is PT. Keep it real.
This is Jonathan. We'll see you next week.